Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening as we begin our fifth and final webinar in this first five-part series. This evening, we have a packed audience, and I know we also have distinguished panelists who are going to deliberate on a very important topic. We chose this topic to go last, but by no means is the least among the topics that we have discussed. A very important topic and some very powerful panelists who are subject matter experts on the topic of gender equality in sport. This evening, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our moderator, a dynamic young man, extremely eloquent, well-researched and well-studied in terms of this topic. Ladies and gentlemen of the listening and viewing audience, welcome to this webinar on gender equality in sport. And I now turn you over to the dynamic Mr. Atto Rockcliffe, Senior Instructor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago's Center for Kinesiology, Physical Education and Sport. Thank you and welcome. Atto, unmute.
Until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, they will be deceased. I interpret the race-specific arguments of Bob Marley to have a larger philosophical point of standing against inequality and injustice with a mission to support justice for all human beings of every social group. Tonight we talk gender equality in sport. Sport is a microcosm of society and as such deals with all the substantive social issues that exist in the wider social space. Gender inequality is one of those fundamental injustices that moral people refuse to ignore and seek to address. Gender refers to the socially constructed roles and relationships between men and women, girls and boys. Gender concerns concepts of both femininity and masculinity. It also includes behavior, attitudes, attributes, and opportunities that any society considers appropriate for girls and boys and women and men. The difference between gender and sex is that the latter refers only to biological differences, whereas gender extends beyond the man-woman dichotomy and includes gender identities like transgender males and females and non-binary folk. It should be noted that gender is a culturally determined phenomenon. Gender equality does not mean focusing solely on women or female, but rather on inequalities between males and females, and should not be confused with feminism or women's studies. Analyses of gender differences often show a disadvantaged and weaker position of women and girls in social, political, economic, legal, educational, and of course, in the realm of sport. This is why there is a tendency of gender discussion and interventions to focus on correcting these imbalances by specifically targeting women and girls. Gender equality does not imply that women and men are the same, but that they have equal value in society and should be afforded rights and treatment as equals. On the other hand, gender equity considers the differences between people and the uneven playing field, focusing instead on outcomes or impacts of any action. Equity means justice or fairness. Social and political change efforts often seek to ensure equality of opportunity without consideration for for the huge power differentials and the use of privilege and discrimination in society that puts some people in a better position than others to take advantage of an opportunity. Tonight, in this webinar, we hope to interrogate the historical, contemporaneous, and futuristic conditions that affects gender equality in sport. Through the invocation of Socratic energy, we hope to examine thoughts around structures in sport and if and how they foster inequality, gender identity constructs, and how they affect the way sport is experienced. We hope to juxtapose sport from a socio-cultural standpoint versus sport from an economic standpoint and its implication for gender equality. We hope to learn lessons that can be interpreted to create a fit practice or context-specific guide to foster sustainable gender equality in sport in general and across sport codes in Trinidad and Tobago. What type of policies can be posited and implemented to address inequalities in sport from a macro, meso, and micro standpoint? Professor Cornel West would encourage us to engage in funky discourse and not a deodorized, mundane, and politically correct discussion. However, our conversation should be grounded in the humanistic traditions and Caribbean cultural and academic method of reasoning, gender equality in sport. To accomplish our task this evening, we have a fantastic panel. Allow me to introduce to you Ms. Grace Jackson, Jamaican Olympic medalist, Director of Sport, Section Head, Sport and Physical and Facilities at the UWI. Ria Ramnarayan, PRO, Trinidad and Tobago Boxing Association, member of International Boxing Association, Women's Commission, gym instructor at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Imran Jan, assistant coach of Trinidad and Tobago or Trinbago Knight Riders, TKR, and senior sport officer, UTT. Ms. Bridget Adams, member of International Netball Federation Coaching Advisory Panel, General Secretary, America's Federation of Netball Association, first Vice President, Trinidad and Tobago Netball Association, and head coach of netball at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. Miss Alina Edwards, 11-time national table tennis champion, table tennis coach at the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And last but not least, Mr. Brian Lewis, Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee President. Ladies and gentlemen, viewers all, we anticipate a fantastic discussion. I will start our discussion off by going straight to Miss Jackson, Miss Grace Jackson. Are you there, Miss Jackson?
I am. Yes, I am.
Okay.
I can hear you clearly.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So, if my reading is correct of the works of scholars like Thomas Sowell and George Peterson, part of their fundamental thesis is that equality is unnatural on its face. Hence, time and energy spent on equality movements are misplaced. Ms. Jackson, I would like to know, what are your thoughts on this kind of thinking as it pertains to gender equality in sport?
Thank you very much. It is, in fact, a pleasure to be here, to be with this group, and I hope that my contribution will impact your audience as we sit. One of my thoughts when I was asked to participate in this was, what happens in sport is that as women, we believe that we get less, and over time, I've gone through a period where the women are not treated equally. And so the question you kept on saying, gender equality. So I don't know whether it's equality or equity, because they're two different things, as we know. And my thought was, if you had two persons of different genders trying to make it to Mount Everest, and yet they are going to be getting awarded based on who gets there first. And what happens is that along the way, everybody struggles, everybody is under the same condition, and the woman eventually gets to the top. And the man comes afterwards. Who then gets the prize? The prize naturally should go to the woman, because it is expected that the person who wins gets the prize. this practice does not happen in sports. When you have the same competitions that go along in sports, usually the men gets more than the women. And there are all kinds of reasons why this happens. Some reasons being more controversial than others. But the question is, the persons who are putting on these sporting events, are they looking at it as the quality of the performance, or are they only looking at it as, you know, who is the stronger sex and what is it that they're offering? Are they looking at it from the perspective of, well, we get more sponsorship for this gender as opposed to that gender, and therefore we are awarding this gender more? So we as women are faced with, in the world of sport, who have made it to the highest level, that we're constantly fighting for equality, so that we believe that our performances are at the level to which when we do well, that we should be compensated in the same way the males should be compensated. And so my example about climbing the hill really means that you are giving your best. If you are giving your best and you are reaching to the top of where you are, you deserve to be rewarded. And the question is, does that really happen in sport? And my answer to that is no.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Lewis, I would like to pose the same question to you. Professor Thomas Sowell and Jordan Peterson, they are basically saying inequality is inevitable. It is natural. We are not born the same height. We are not born the same weight. Differences are inherent. So their argument, their thesis is this whole quest for equality, the equality movement is misplaced. What are your thoughts, Mr. Lewis?
Thank you very much. Let me just take off the mask. There's a time not too long ago, if I walked into a bank or any business in Trinidad and Tobago with a mask on as a Afro-Trinbagonian, the police party will be called immediately. I say that to say that a lot has changed in the world today, a lot has changed in the society, but there's a lot that hasn't changed. On the question of inequality, let me say this. I tend to take a particular approach with any discussion about equality, because there's always a fundamental question: what is equality? It is not a simple conversation. A lot of what we talk about, a lot of what is discussed, a lot of what we see happening, that can be qualified as or articulated as inequality is really a symptom. And what is that a symptom of? From the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee perspective, we have a program which many of the panelists here, and maybe many of the people tuning in, they are aware of it. It's called Future Female. I've been known to publicly advocate in all areas, all parts of the world, for female and women, and articulated that international sport, in particular the Olympic movement, is a boys' club. In particular, old, white, traditional and conservative. But even in articulating that, it's also simplistic, because one has to appreciate that sport doesn't operate in a vacuum. Sport mirrors, in many ways, reflects society. And I always like to point out that if one understands the history of sport, the sociology of sport, it goes back 500 years. The Eurocentric European construct where Black, colored, indigenous, first people, women were essentially seen as property. They didn't have the same rights as male, white male. And that social construct took deep roots with over 400 years of European domination of the world. So a lot of what we have been engaged over the years, whatever ism, it is deeply ingrained. It is part of the socialization and culturalization, and it's become systemic and institutionalized. And even when we talk about, and we'll separate it because the theme of this evening's discussion is gender and not necessarily race and otherism. But there's a sort of intersectionality about it, because even when you look at gender equality or gender inequality, you have issues of race, you have issues of disability, you have issues of class, you have different issues that come into play that contribute, add to the reality of gender inequality. And you also have a situation, so for example, we are having this discussion. Let's take it from a Caribbean perspective. There are those who believe that in the Caribbean, the issue, even within sport, is less about race, as an example, and more about gender, because of the construct of society inheriting this through colonialism and slavery, where male, it's a patriarchal social construct, and women are seen as, in the context of gender, as I said, property. And there are a number of aspects of this conversation, which I hope we will all touch before the evening is out, that adds a profound reality of any discussion that surrounds gender. And we all have a duty, a responsibility, and an obligation to have the uncomfortable conversation and not be superficial, because the issue of, in this case, gender and all the aspects of it that leads to the end result, which is what women can bring to the table, what women can bring to the decision-making process, what women can bring to the sustainable development of sport, in this case, is generally lost because they aren't given an equal opportunity to fully develop. You know, they aren't mentored enough by women, they aren't mentored enough by men who have been traditionally part of the old boys club. So that would be my opening sort of salvo, because I'm sensitive that we have such a powerful group of people that I would like to see, not that I'm taking control of the webinar, but I would like to see it more interactive amongst the esteemed panel, who all will bring that knowledge and actual experience to add significant color and purpose to this conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. So I take it, if I'm to surmise your contribution correctly, you are rejecting Sowell and Peterson's notion, and you're suggesting that this thing has been existing for so long that it appears natural, as if inequality is natural, because it's ingrained into our I think the literature calls it, it has become structured. So there's a term in the literature about structuration. Anyway, I would like to invite Ria to answer, if then we are like-minded people, what is the importance of this discussion among ourselves, and the likelihood of the people that support or sign on to this conversation are all in solidarity with gender equality? Why then is it important for us to discuss gender equality in sport? Ria?
Hi, thanks, Ato. First of all, I would like to say that the topic of gender equality, and probably rightly so, it's often used as a synonym for women in sport, because there are so many disparities between both genders, male and female, and most times women, they are at the receiving end, at the bottom of that disparity, receiving less funding, there are less numbers in management, less numbers in leadership position, and so on. What I would want to say though is that, before I answer your question directly, is that there are some exceptions, and I might be the devil's advocate here, but I would like to, I would like to point out that some men in sport do also face inequality. And just two examples would be netball, for instance. And after you and I were having this conversation sometime before, where male netballers, it's not seen as a sport for men. And in some literature that I read before, up until 2018, the INF, and Mrs. Adams might help me out here, they still held fast to netball is still a female-only sport, at least at an international level.
Yes.
Right? Then there is like rhythmic gymnastics. I think it was just about 2 decades ago that Spain became the first country to officially recognize and promote men's rhythmic gymnastics. And for those who might, I think we are a lot more familiar with artistic gymnastics, the vault and balance beam and so on, but rhythmic, of course, with the ribbons and so on, right? And while the FIG do recognize them, there are still several restrictions and limitations on international competition for the men. So, and even here locally, I mean, I come from boxing, and that being a very male dominant sport, as most would think, actually the women did better and received more than the men locally. I would say in the decade that Giselle and myself kind of, you know, ruled the roost a little bit.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, Ato, I think it's really important to have this discussion on all those terms, because we need to recognize too the progress that we have made. We women sometimes think that we need to fight against the men, but do we fight against them, or do we get their support? And my career, I would say, is unique because of the men and their support, I have been able to achieve what I have achieved. And Mr. Lewis, he's part of the panel, and he was very instrumental in getting me to where I am in terms of not just my sport and achievement as a coach, but also my sport and education. So for me, I think this conversation is extremely important, and for us to recognize the progress that we have made and also what more needs to be done. Not only what still has to be done, but the progress that has been made.
Yeah. Fantastic, Ria. Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing that into the conversation. I think two important things you mentioned. One, this impulse to think that gender is a conversation about women. But we do understand why it is skewed towards women, because they are the oppressed group. But it's important to look and be more nuanced about how it functions in different sporting codes. And then the second very important argument or point I think you're making is the importance of solidarity. And if we were to reflect across time and space, social change, especially important social change, requires a wide coalition of actors, especially patriarchal actors like Mr. Lewis, and I don't mean patriarchal in a negative sense. I mean in a realistic sense, because he's a man and he enjoys the patriarchal privileges. Ms. Adams, I would like for you to jump in here since Rhea invoked netball, and we know that you are the netballer extraordinaire on the panel. I would love if you would add some context to that particular discussion. Ms. Adams?
Thank you, Ato. I was
Fantastic.
just taking off my mic.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm happy you engaged me at this point in time that we still have Mr. Lewis on the program.
Yes.
Because I am going to take the angle that netball is an all-female sport and we are not in the Olympics. And I know Mr. Lewis will identify with this and will provide some answers, I hope. Netball is played by tens of thousands of players around the world, you know, and it's all female. There's one big problem facing netball. The main reason why is it not yet included as an Olympic sport? This is the only 28 sports that are played at one games. But most of these permanent sports, they are only space for a couple of temporary sports at a time. And netball was given temporary acceptance, I think in 1995. And to date, netball has not been included in the Olympic sport as an all-female sport. Do we now have to get men involved? What is it thinking? What is the logic? Many people have argued that the main reason that netball hasn't yet been accepted in the Olympics is because it is only really played by a handful of Commonwealth nations. You know, although there are netball leagues in almost 100 countries across the world, a few of these stand out as world powerhouses. They include Australia, New Zealand, England, South Africa, Jamaica, you name them. Okay, so the equality problem is, as of 2012, only 44% of Olympic athletes were women. Despite the IOC doing their best in recent years to even out the gender equality gap, they still haven't managed to reach the magical 50%. If netball was to be included in the games in the future, it could help to solve this problem due to the fact that it is primarily played by women. So will netball be included in the Olympics? I am hoping that Mr. Lewis could provide a view on this, as the big question remains. If so, when? Unfortunately, the answer to this question remains unknown. However, the fact that netball is growing across the world, combined with the fact that it has constantly been able to pull big crowds over the past few years, suggests that sport has a very strong case for inclusion. Why haven't we not been included in terms of equality? Is it that we are one gender sport? That is a question Mr. Lewis can or cannot answer, but there's where we stand in terms of netball and gender equality.
Yeah. Mr. Lewis, do you care to add a response to Ms. Adams's question?
Well, the reality is that the issue of gender equality is far bigger than just a particular sport. As I indicated early on, I tend to focus on the root cause of inequalities, and in this case, gender, not necessarily at the level of in this case. So Bridget asked about netball and the Olympics. I can't answer that question because the International Olympic Committee is made up of members. Yes. It's an elite club, so that the National Olympic Committee aren't represented like in other international federations. So if I were to sit here now and speculate as to what is in their mind, that is the level of the IOC, I would be using up valuable time.
All right.
And I wouldn't really want to, I'm perfectly happy because Bridget and I have a very good relationship to have that conversation at another time, and I could try to find out. Right now, I'm in a battle with the IOC just to get them to recognize that Rule 50 is explicitly linked to the racist views of and racist approach of Avery Brundage, the then IOC president. I simply add that in to say that the IOC is a very interesting organization that is Eurocentric with all that may entail. So I really can't answer a specific question at this point in time of why netball is not on the IOC's radar for the Olympic game. But as I said, I'm particularly keen to hear everyone's views about the topics and aspects of gender equality, such as intersectionality. We haven't even touched on from a perspective of gender inequality, equality, the whole history of sexuality and how the traditional heteronormative construct of gender creates discrimination and conscious biases. And as I said, the whole issue of gender equality in sport, it's going to be very difficult for us to break the back of it as long as society remains inherently discriminatory towards gender and women. And it's not just a sport thing. It's the same in technology, in business, in the universities, etc.
Yes.
The women need to be more involved at the decision-making process and at the head table, and they aren't across the sectors in society, and we need to change that.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lewis. I would like to invite Alina into the conversation because Mr. Lewis is talking about leadership and women being involved at the highest level of leadership. Alina, I would like to pose to you, what is the danger of fostering symbolic female leadership in sport that maintains the patriarchal substance because of structuration? So in other words, I'm asking, do you view female leadership in sport as, or women that hold leadership, women that hold leadership in sport as having real power, so to speak?
Hello, good evening.
Yes.
Good evening to the viewers and to the panelists. I would say, from my experience as a past general secretary of the local table tennis association, I held a very powerful position, which was general secretary, which was more or less the engine room for overseeing the actual daily runnings of the association. And me being in that position was more or less pose a major issue, because I was able to, when I was trying to make changes across the board for the betterment of athletes, not only male or female, but across the board as athletes and for the sport to move forward, I always found that I was at a standstill with regards to the male. I was probably the only female, along with my, the association only had 2 females, which was myself and my assistant. And all the other positions were held by men. And they could not understand, or they had an issue with me firstly being elected general secretary, because they was more or less what Mr. Lewis was saying, like an old boys club. So they came in with their own slate, and I was more or less the surprise winner on the day. And so the changes that I had in mind in terms of pushing and promoting the sport forward, I always had an issue with getting that done because of the power that I held and the position that I had as General Secretary. And within weeks, they were trying to get me out, but I stood strong, and I was able to go until the end. And I realized that we still have a major issue in this country with regards to women holding powerful positions in certain association or institutions. So.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And finally, I would like to invite Mr. Jan. Mr. Jan, there are disparities in playing conditions in cricket, and yet the conversation is centered around things like salaries, investment, and spectatorship as it pertains to women. Could you share your thoughts around gender equality in cricket, and what would that lead to injustice if women and men in cricket were to receive equal remuneration given the differences in playing conditions?
A pleasant good evening, Ato. Pleasant good evening to my fellow panelists. Fantastic conversation thus far. I like where we're heading, and I like Mr. Lewis's take with regards to where the conversation should go. So kudos to everyone thus far. Ato, what I would like to say with regards to equity and in regards to salaries with cricket is that the women, first and foremost, they play a 4-day test match and the men play 5 days. That's one. All right. So it can be debated that they don't play that extra day to be remunerated at the same level. So that's probably one. The other thing is the men's side, they have a lot more activity. There's a lot more cricket on the horizon. There's T20 leagues and there's international cricket, and the women doesn't have as much. So, I mean, prior to this webinar, I was having a few conversations with a few people, and it's the same basis on which the question you posed to me as to what my thoughts were. For me, I even made the example of 2007 when Venus Williams stood up in arms and up in arms with regards to some of her colleagues saying, hey, the men are getting 1.4 million US first prize. The first prize should be 1.4 million. And so said, so done. So since 2007 till now, Wimbledon has adjusted their prize money structure equitably. And I love that. Having said that, in cricket, and I can even bring it a little local for you, there isn't a prize money structure in place even locally, Ato, and to our viewers. And for me, that is a bothering, concerning sort of event. And we have to fix that. We have to put that right. Because the women these days are putting in as much work. They train as hard. They have to buy supplements. They have to look after themselves. So for me, it's definitely not equal across the board when it comes to gender equality and equity. And that's something we need to fix.
Okay.
Thank
you for that. And I want to probe a little bit more on that because the original moderator for this evening's discussion was supposed to be Stacey Ann King, who you know is a West Indian cricketer. And I had meaningful conversations as she endorsed me to deputize her. And I was able to understand some of the nuances. So there is a disparity in playing conditions, but the extent of the disparity in remuneration, for example, I wouldn't call the particular country, but there's a major cricketing nation where an average elite contract for the A players is about $400,000. And the elite contract for the equivalent female is about $60,000. I would like you to attempt to posit an explanation as what may justify that level of disparity.
I told you, putting me in a position there, but I'll try my best. I am aware of the country that you're speaking about as well. I'm also aware of the other countries, most of the top playing nations, the Indians, the Australians, the South Africans, and the disparity in salary when it comes to the male contracted players and the female contracted players. Yeah. So to explain to you and our viewing audience why I think that is so, I could tell you off the top of my head. The gentlemen attract a lot more sponsorship. That is what has been discussed, and I'm privy to some of those conversations. A lot of male players attract some of the major sponsorships and multiple sponsorships, whereby the ladies don't. But I could counter that for you and our listening audience, because viewership is another thing I know we're going to go into. But if the women aren't being seen enough, clearly, Atto, they aren't going to be sponsors aligning to them. Yes. So without sponsors, the monies aren't going to be there. So for me, that disparity is so huge because they don't have an audience. The women in cricket and in sport, because my research would have shown that the women in sport don't get enough airtime. Let's put it like that. So to answer your question, that is probably one of the main reasons why the woman's salary is here and the male salary is there. In short, I mean, I could go on, but in short.
All right, thank you. I noticed Ms. Adams is shaking her head in agreement, and I'm assuming that she's agreeing. But I want to ask her then, if women are approximately 50% of our population, wouldn't women, if they were conscious and engage in agency, wouldn't they be able to address some of the pitfalls in viewership, for example?
Certainly. However, how far can we go with it? That's the big question. How far can we go? Who will listen to us? We will have our positions in terms of our viewership. Sponsors, I'm in agreement with Imran when he said that you get sponsorship more for men than women in particular sports. You see the salary package, there's a big disparity. And where is the incentive? Where is the equality? And that's my position in terms of where do we go from here with the gender equality or inequality for sport and sporting men and women in our country.
All right. So Ms. Jackson, should we be thinking about... Sorry.
Moderator?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Can I make a quick point? I really love to hear. I'm chomping at the bit, so to speak, to hear Ms. Grace Jackson and we are on this. You know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier on. And again, I love the broadness of the conversation, but here's the bottom line. When you talk about the commercialization of sport, you start to get into the entertainment aspect of sport, yeah? The reality is that sport traditionally has been male-dominated, male-oriented. In very significant ways, there have been an underinvestment in women's sports. There have been a deliberate, intentional suppression of women's sport because inherently of the competitive nature of the commercial aspect of sport. So women's sport has been underinvested in by males. And you then get aspects of when you start to shift into the entertainment value of women's sport, you start to get into issues that need to be discussed, and that for someone like myself who is an advocate for women in sport, women and young girls in sport, future female, etc. The issue that is always an elephant in the room is the issue of the sexualization of women and women's sport, the objectification of women in sport. And there are examples. If you look, for example, at how beach volleyball has shut up in terms of, and I'm not knocking beach volleyball for all the volleyballers there. I'm making a particular point in beach volleyball coming onto the Olympic program as an example and becoming in a very short space of time one of the top three in terms of value. And that's not rocket science.
Yes.
You look at how they dress beach volleyball women. So I'm saying in terms of the conversation about gender equality, or inequalities as it relates to women, it's not a simple conversation. There are aspects of it that until we get society on the whole, because you're going against the grain, you're talking about equality of pay for women in sport, but women, there is no equal pay for women in technology, in business, etc. So I'm just simply saying that this is a real wow conversation. Otherwise, I get involved with relate to gender equality. It goes. There are so many aspects of it.
All right. I'm really keen to hear Ms. Jackson's perspective. Alicia Walker wrote, and she coined the term womanism because she believed that men and white women were not able to tell the stories of that Black women experience. So I'm really keen to hear from a woman her thoughts about the support. What can females do to support women in sport?
Thanks very much. Well, I can tell you what is currently happening. There is a group called International Women's Forum that have a number of top female executives that either own the companies across the world or they are positioned in companies that these persons connected. And what they have done is they started identifying Olympic or world athletes, not Olympic athletes, because there are some sports that are not in Olympics that they do take. And they started creating what you call a mentorship program to have these persons come in. It's called the World Athletics Business Network, the Women's Athletic Business Network, I'm sorry. And what they're doing is that they're trying to help women who have competed internationally to make that move to the top, to be able to get in, to understand, because the problem that happens in sports, as Brian just said, it's not really restricted to sports. It really is across the board. So these women who have made it to the top, in these, a lot of them recognize that people who have done sports bring to the table in the workplace something more than your ordinary person. And I didn't say woman particular, because coming from sports, there are certain attributes that you take with you, that you take into the workplace. But on top of that, because of everything that is being discussed here, is that women are climbing a steeper hill than the men are. Because when sports, in the original parts of sport, it was really men. It was how men, men competed against each other. And so women are trying to get their position there, and they're fighting for these various positions as they move up. So there's no way I think that equality is going to be now. What you start with equity first. Can we get similar for what we're doing? I mean, I just heard Imran talk about what it is, the value of women. But the truth of the matter is that cricket started a little bit later for women. So it will take time. What are people looking for? Whether it's women or men, they're looking for skill and excitement. And so as women do better in their sports, they get it. Serena stood up and she asked for, she stood her ground. Now, she is not the first one to have stood ground, because in tennis, they had been talking about that for some time. But she was in a position that when she stood her ground, what happened is that the switch happened, where when she was playing a final, or when the women players were playing, the crowd was much more than the men.
Yes.
And when that happened, it meant that therefore those who are organizing, first, the woman had to have a presence at the table, right? So they could have the discussion. And also they could then say, well, the women are doing, they are playing interesting tennis. And so therefore the money is coming in. And so it's equal all around. Yes. It's the same thing that women's football is fighting for. right? Or soccer, I don't know what you call
Yeah.
it,
Football
whichever
is
one you
fine.
call it. But it is the same thing that they're fighting for, and they will get it, right? You might have losses along the way, but that's what sport is about. You don't win the first time you go out there necessarily, but you keep at it. You identify what it is that made you not win or not get through, and you apply that and you come back again. And so I'm strongly behind the women's football teams because they're there. They attract the crowd, right? They attract the crowd because they play good football. And so they must get the support. But the support is not just for the women on the field of play,
Yeah.
it's also for the women off the field.
Yes.
Those of us who have sat on committees, I've sat on several international committees for my sport and for university sport, right? And what happens, even when you look on those committees, the disparities there. But the women are strong. They stand up and they speak out and they ask for the fact that there must be more equity in
Yes.
sports. Than we know equality is not going to come right away, but you ask for equity until you can get equality.
All right.
And so that's my thinking on that.
Thank you very much for that. And that
Mr.
conversation.
Moderator, you have to permit me, Mr. Moderator, I just want to jump into, because I think as is well established, I'm on the clock here, right? So I may have to leave, as I was explained before. The other, I want to throw this into also the conversation point. Women are themselves at times their own worst enemies in terms of the battle, so to speak, for gender equality. Hear what I mean by that? I've had many mothers that they don't want their daughters taking sport too seriously because of the issue of they don't want them to become manly or too tomboyish, or I've heard women say that mothers say that there's this perception, so they say they don't want their daughters exposed to lesbianism. Now, I talk frank, I talk open, and I put things on the table, because for us to move to the desired state, we must have the uncomfortable conversations about the current state and what are some of the factors that act as constraints and obstacles to women wholesale embrace, as I call it. And there are so many dimensions that it is important for us to, in my view, address some of these things, because as I keep saying, all the people on this panel are people I have enormous respect for because of their involvement in sport and their experiences and knowledge. And it would be remiss of me if I didn't I also include yourself and Mr. Pritchard in this. If I didn't take the press and push, and even if it may rattle the cage a little bit, first have the kinds of conversations that I'm fed up of people having behind closed doors about the whole issue of gender equality and women in sport.
All right, thank you. And on that note, I would like to go to Rhea to build on that conversation. So what can we do about some of those specific things? So there are cultural implications. Ms. Lewis highlighted the fact that certain sports are gendered or they're associated with masculine tendencies. Rhea, you spoke earlier about your experiences as a boxer, and I would imagine that is one of those sports that are so associated. What can we do to solve this situation? Because oftentimes we engage in rhetoric and not sufficient, deliberate, strategic positing of ideas to solve the challenges. Rhea?
Yeah, well, I think to begin with, just to build on what Mr. Lewis said about women being their own worst enemies at times, right? So just to elaborate on that a little bit from my perspective, we are sometimes our own worst enemies with each other in that we don't support other women because we want to be the queen, be on top. So instead of holding another woman's hand and pulling her up to join with us, it's like, no, we want to be, you know, the queen here alone. So we fight against each other in that way. And then we are our own worst enemies within ourselves. So that when we face obstacles or we face, you know, that hardship, we tend to back off. And I'll give you an example that that was thrown to us at a gender equality forum. And just stepping aside a little bit, it was a gender equality forum that I attended in Bulgaria in 2018. The color theme was purple and pink, and 99% of the participants were women. So for me, immediately, I was like, this is not gender equality. This should have been named woman in sport. So getting back to what I was saying, the life coach there, and Mr. Lewis is very familiar with her, Gabriella, she said that a man would, you know, have maybe 60% of the requirements for a particular job, whether in sport or not, right? But he'd have 100% confidence, and he would go with that confidence to apply for that position. Whereas women, we sometimes have 90 or 95% of the requirement, and we worry so much about that next 5 or 10%. We worry about what are they going to ask for, why we don't have it, how are we going to get it, and then we stop and we say, you know what? Let's wait until we get that 5% or that 10% again. Let me wait until I get that degree, or let me wait until I get that certificate. So in the process, we hold back ourselves, which brings me to answering your question. I think the first and foremost way that we can help solve that problem is by sticking to our goals. And I say this as women and as a man who support women in their drive for, I would agree with Ms. Jackson, first equity and then equality. And if we have to break those glass ceilings, and even if it means some of the shards falling on us, or we getting a little cut here and there, or as in boxing, you know, taking a knock or two, we need to go forward with it, because too many times we sidestep, we step aside, I should say, from taking those opportunities. So coming from boxing where, yes, you know, that discussion with lesbianism, or it's too manly, or it's a man's sport. Fortunately for me, the first female that I had support me was my mom. And her only concern was me coming home with like a black eye that would really hamper me from studying or something. She knew there would be injuries.
Yes.
She understood that. And she's not a sports person per se. As a matter of fact, I am the eclectic one in my family. I'm the odd one out. No one else does sport. But my mom understood, like, look, there will be injuries. It's just that I don't want you to get injured to the point where, you know, it hampers everything else. So I got that support from her as a woman. And for me, I never had too much of an issue, because at home, I didn't have those issues. So I was a little bit oblivious to the issues until I would say I got more into the sport, right? So I would say directly, simple enough, you know what? Continue moving forward. Take the opportunities that are presented to you. And if the opportunities aren't presented to you, then create them. And you know, when I did ICCP, which Mr. Lewis and the TTOC nominated me for, I got accepted, and then I was my application was revoked because the people thought that I was still a professional boxer, because AIBA still had me listed as a pro boxer. And I remember the efforts that Mr. Lewis went through to make them understand that I was no longer boxing professionally. So I got back that, you know, my application went through, I got back in, and you know what? I took the opportunity and I made good on it. In fact, I made so good on it that when I got back home, I showed him my results, and then TTOC and Mr. Lewis again, well, you know what? You should do memos. You should go and do your master's. So that is what I'm saying. Take those opportunities and push forward with it. No matter what, you have to push forward.
Thank you for that, Ria. And that brings me to the whole idea of allies. And I, again, conversing with Stacey and King, she told me, and I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to divulge, but when they won the World Cup in 2016, the men were traveling back first class and they were in coach. But some of the guys, because they are in solidarity with injustice or against injustice, they allowed some of the girls to sit in first class and they sat in coach. Imran, I would like to ask you, what role does the West Indies men or male cricket team have in advocating for justice for their female counterparts?
Ato, the men have a really big role to play. They could advocate and actually advocate in a meaningful way. You have a lot of senior guys around the squad now. When I say senior guys who's played cricket for the last 10 years, over a decade, and who's playing professionally in these T20 leagues for quite some time. Not only that, we have a leader now in the test match environment and holder who speaks out a lot now. He actually speaks his mind, and I like that. So to answer your question quickly, Ato, it is good that happened. I didn't even know that. That's nice of the guys to allow some of the ladies to go in front. I love that. But it is now, I think the time is now for the advocacy to get these ladies on par with regards to everything that we speak about. If we don't do it now, and I respect Mr. Lewis's view of, and also Ms. Jackson, with regards to how long it's been taking, and Bridget speaking about netball, things don't change overnight, we know this, but advocacy is something that's going to continue. And I think the time is now, Ato, that we, as the male cricketers, the senior team, push hard for the women to come on board. That's my view and my opinion on it.
And hopefully go beyond the symbolic to the substantive. So that was great. And the symbols are useful, but I think if you're to choose between symbols and substance, we may choose substance.
Most definitely. Definitely.
Alina? Hello?
Yes.
Hi. I'm keen to get your take on that same question about what the male table tennis players can do to show solidarity with the struggle of injustice as it pertains to disparity in the sport of table tennis.
Well, firstly, I think the female table tennis athletes tend to be a bit firm. Whereas because of the top athletes, that is, we are more or less sort of closeness, and the males tend to stand in solidarity with us. But you see, the main issue is not so much the athletes in our case. It mainly stems from on top, the administration. So you'll find that, the male may stand up and for example, I have quite a few of the males will be like, okay, if the women are going, we are going. If the women are not going, we are not going. Because they believe that women have a better chance of winning than us. But then it always more or less goes to saying that let's put the men first. Let's put those guys first, and then the women come after. But what they don't realize is that every time the women go to compete, we always come back successful. But they hardly ever, or very few times, they more or less highlight those winnings. They more or less stick to when the men win, it's like a big thing, but when the women win, it's like, okay, well, the women win, because they always find some excuse to say, no, always had less teams, or the women didn't play hard enough. It was like, okay, if you come third or you come second, they say, oh, they only had 4 teams. So, they always try to downplay the women. Whereas the men will know very well, who would have gone with us, knowing that we would have battled playing against the other strong, let's say the strong countries, like the Spanish-speaking countries. And we battle with them and we excel. Yes, they are with us, but as I said to you, it always stems from the administration level. Yes. And most times in these administration levels are people or men, mostly men who've never played the sport in their lives. They don't even know what it takes or what is entailed to actually perform and achieve. And they are sitting in these positions and making decisions for the players on a whole.
All right. Thank you, Alina. To you and all the other panelists, I would like us to all be thinking about specific things. I really want us to get to the specific initiatives that we can implement to address, one, structuration, and two, encourage people to understand the agency they have as individuals at the very personal level. But while we think about that, I was asked to entertain some questions from Mr. Lewis because we know that he may be leaving us. So I was asked that we entertain this.
Mr. Moderator, before
Yes.
I take the questions, again, forgive me and my colleagues on this tape, on this panel. The other aspect I think that has a significant impact on gender inequality, equality, is that there is a need to create a safe space for women and girls in sport and for them to retain their interest in sport. And what I mean, the issue of sexual harassment and sexual abuse, emotional abuse is very high. I recall a couple of years ago saying at an international forum to deal with gender that at that time, and that was before the thing with gymnastics in the US came about, I made a statement on the question of sexual harassment and sexual abuse of girls and women in sport. But it also has issues to do with young boys. But again, this is gender equality. I said that the issue of sexual harassment and sexual abuse in sport is worse than doping in sport. And a couple of years later, people who felt I was wrong to make that statement came back and told me they apologized because I was right, because by then the issue had blown up. Also the issue of Weinstein or whatever the guy's name in terms of Hollywood. So that is also an important aspect to do with the issue of gender in sport that needs to also be recognized. The issue of sexual harassment and abuse of women, girls in sport, the environment. They always have to be defensive. It is an issue, and in general, it's an issue that gets swept under the carpet by the protectionism when you have a patriarchal system.
Okay, thank you for that. So we will entertain some of the questions and allow you to answer them. So the questions that are from Mr. Lewis. May we have those, please?
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
I have a few questions addressed to Mr. Brian Lewis. The first question is, would you offer a position to a female to balance the equation in terms of numbers, or to a male because he is the most suited person to do the task?
Can you, moderator, could you clarify
okay.
the question?
The question is, would you give a female a position because for balance or token over a male who is more appropriately qualified for the position?
Let me answer the question this way, and hopefully it wouldn't be seen as a duck. One of the things, for example, I ensure that was done at the level of the Olympic Committee, the TTOC, Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, is that we have a gender equal board. Yeah, I've clearly and openly advocated that given the history of the TTOC, I believe that the next president of the TTOC should be a female. I've also articulated that at the international level as it relates to the International Olympic Committee. What have I said by saying that? We need to create the culture and the environment that will allow women the opportunity. If in the effort to do that, there is need necessarily for affirmative action, then I'm all for it. Because at the end of the day, we have to stop, we have to break down the barriers and the glass ceiling that prevents women from getting the opportunity. And that's how I'd answer the question.
Thank you for that. Do we have another question?
Yes, there's another question.
Thank you.
Is there a sacrifice to have equal number of persons based on gender equality in an organization, or having the most competent persons to suit the various positions?
Okay. I believe he answered that question already, but I will post it. Ms. Lewis, did you hear the question?
Yeah, the gist of it, let me say again that it is important in the context of gender equality that we create the environment and the opportunity for women. And it is important, as I said, that you see, it's very easy to use meritocracy to keep out women or even black colored and colored people from the decision-making process in international sport. The reality is that we need more women, as far as I'm concerned, in my view, at the head table. I believe that we need to create the opportunity, but we also need to build the capacity. And as you would have heard Ria say, and I am not going to get into it, I'm a huge believer in giving an opportunity and building capacity. At the level of the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee, we have 4 members of staff, all female. Because I believe in creating opportunity, building capacity, and giving people the opportunity to grow. In this case, if we want more females at the head table, if we want to give them the self-confidence to get into the guile that is elective sport politics, we have to build that capacity, give them the opportunity to learn, expose them to it, mentor them, and in the main, because it is a male boys club, men, forward-thinking men, have to literally lay that groundwork that allows women and work in collaboration with like-minded male and female to create greater gender equality. That's how I'd answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Do we have any more?
We have 2 more questions, and this is from YouTube.
We can take it.
Okay. Coming out of the statement by Ms. Ria Ramnarine and drawing a parallel with the current Black Lives Matter movement and the viewpoint of the fact that this statement does not mean that other lives do not matter, does the statement, "the future is female," open itself up to the same potential misunderstanding? And how can we go about ensuring that this is not how it is seen?
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis? Hello? Mr. Lewis? I'm not hearing you, sir.
Remember,
Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis, we're having a very difficult time hearing you. So, would one of the other panelists like to answer that question? Ms. Jackson?
Yes,
please.
I actually wanted to speak to, as I listened to the question, as somebody who actually has ran for president in the National Association, some of the things that Mr. Lewis was saying is it really depends on what's happening in the environment, because it's a matter of votes. It's not a matter that you put somebody in a position because of, you know, their competence. You are competent and you have the best ideas, but if it is like politics, if it is that they say, well, we don't want her there because they don't like you for certain reasons. Well, usually what I find is that the men get a group of women together and then they try to compare competence. And notice that was one of the questions, talking about competence. Many a times the women are actually more competent, but the men are able to talk differently. And so they get an opportunity to be on a platform that seems higher. And so that's why one thinks that they should vote them in. And their competence or lack thereof shows when the continuity happens in the associations, that when they are not producing, but they're fluffing, and those who still support them will stay there. And if you look at it overall, the growth of the association is stagnant because there's a pretense that these men are worthy as opposed to the women that really could make a difference. And so, you know, we're talking around that, and yes, it is good. I mean, I heard Brian when he says he has these competent women. The competent women are there because, you know, in organizations, it's just that people believe there must be secretaries, there must be the social event persons. They are not respecting them, that they have the knowledge, the tenacity, the strength, the same things that they used in sports, you know, that they can go to the top of the table and they can work hard. And you know that women work 10 times harder than men just to be even, right? And not only that can they work hard, but they can use their competencies to get results, because they are results driven, just like the athletes, the women athletes, they're results driven. So they will work hard to achieve the necessary objectives. But we pretend and we talk around it and we pretend as if, you know, are you choosing, as the question was posed, yes, are you going to choose gender over competence? And nothing like that. The women are competent.
Yes.
And we need to understand that, and we need to work with that and put them in the places that they need to be. Because many times they are able to deliver. But yeah. I digress. I talk too much, but I just think that we need to change our thinking. And even those who are listening and watching, they too need to change their thinking, you know, because the woman can produce.
I thank you for that. And I do not know the intentionality of the person's question, but it could have been a very provocative question, and they're coming from a good place. Also, they were very specific about the competence. I believe it is okay for us to engage in critical discourse so that we can elucidate the reasons for our decisions. And I think Mr. Lewis spoke to, he has no problem with engaging in some affirmative action, because if we systematically oppress a particular gender for many, 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 many years, rob them of opportunities and a voice, etc., what is wrong with atoning for some of that? But I'm still keen to, I thought that was a fantastic question. If one of the other panelists, is Mr. Lewis back? Well, one of the other panelists can share in terms of the juxtaposition between the Black Lives Matter and Futurist Female. I think
Mr. Moderator, yes, I got knocked off by the technology. Let me take this opportunity to thank UTT for inviting me, and to thank the other members of the panel, yourself also, and Mr. Pritchard. As you know, I have to leave. I have an engagement which has been delayed. So I would like to do the courteous thing and thank all those and thank every question, all the questions, the Tobago Olympic Committee, which is also the Trinidad and Tobago Commonwealth Games Association. We look forward to continuing to support, be part of any discussion that addresses the urgent, important contemporary issues that we need to address so that sport can fulfill its true potential and power to make a positive difference in the lives of youth, young people, and society. So thank you very much. I humbly apologize. I have to leave. It is in no way intended to be disrespectful or discourteous to my fellow panelists and UTT. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As Mr. Lewis leaves us, is someone interested in answering? I mean, maybe Ria, I know you're intimately involved with the Olympic Committee. That juxtaposition between, or the danger of misinterpreting future is female as Black Lives Matter is misinterpreted or interpreted correctly, I don't know, but the viewer is asking for someone to answer that. Specifically Mr. Lewis, but I think you can do as a TTOC person, Ria.
Okay, I will say what I think, and then I see Ms. Jackson is also putting her hand up, so she will assist me as she does have a lot more years and experience in this. But I thought when I heard the question, I thought it was really very, very interesting because the person was I think if I heard correctly, you know, it was to say yes, all lives matter, but with that Black Lives Matter and what it stands for. And in this case, future is female. If I'm understanding correctly, are they asking, does it mean that the future doesn't include men or it's not as important for men?
Yes,
I think because of that huge disparity in most cases between both genders, I think it's important to have that drive for future as female. I personally don't think it will be misinterpreted. We do still have, I mean, I would really hope that no female misunderstands it. Where the males are concerned, I do agree that we still have some who are extreme and some who still think that women don't belong in sport. But that's a small minority though. That's a minority. I think generally from my personal experience with men who are involved in sport and not involved in sport, they support women. So I personally don't think that it should or would be misinterpreted.
thank you. Ms. Jackson?
Yes, can I say it actually is a very good question because I
I think so
actually
too.
thought of this even before we came on. If you think about the discussion about Black Lives Matter, there are some who are able to explain it very clearly. And what they say is that if you go back in history and you think about the whole question of whites and blacks and you know the slave masters and the people who worked, and how when you start from that point, the people who worked were usually black or colored or whatever they call them at the time. And then they would come and they work in the houses. They were never good enough to be the persons who were owning these things. And as time came and black persons got themselves equipped and the freer they got, they were able to own, they got themselves educated and they positioned themselves and they were bright and they moved out. And then the treatment of them from back then when they were slaves seemed to have continued over time. And therefore, even when they got to a position where they moved themselves into these positions, there was still a kind of treatment of them in that particular way. So the comparison is very real because back in the day, men were primarily the ones that did sport. And as time has gone on, women have also participated in sport. So as we get closer and the women are getting closer in terms of, in some sports, they're close in terms of competition, sometimes outdoing. You are getting that situation where the inequity of the competition itself is closing, and therefore that is seen as by some persons, well, you know, it is still supposed to happen the same way in which white people believe that Black people are still supposed to be submitted, and they only let them in when they believe that they follow these qualities and they're only going to stay at this position, etc. It is very similar to what the president was actually talking about. The feeling that some persons are saying that women must not be there. So I think the concept of the future is female is really good, because what it's doing, it's bringing the attention to exactly what we are talking about. Persons will start looking, they will start asking questions, and we will educate them so that they can understand what is meant by the future is female. It's not that female are going to come and only take over everything. It's the fact that they are going to have a place at the table, and they are going to be the decision makers in the same way males have done it for over the years. Black people will have their part in life because they are positioning themselves. They're educated, they're moving into positions, and they will have it. So I think it was an excellent question, and I think there is similarity. What there needs to be is an explanation of the fact that what is meant by the future is female, in the same way that there has to be an explanation that Black lives matter, because all lives really matter. But right now, Black lives are the ones that are being challenged. It's the same thing in sport. Women matter. And so how do we get them? So the future is female. That means we are on a path to achieve something.
Thank you
Does
for
that
that.
help?
I hope so. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to that briefly before we move on to some of the other questions we had? Are you comfortable? All right. I would like to invite Ms. Adams to speak to the next question. And it's around, should we be thinking about gender equality in sport in different ways as it pertains to sport as a social good versus sport as a business? Is it reasonable to have the same expectation?
Actually, if you ask any sport participant what they love most about their involvement, and they are sure to mention the bonds forged with their teammates. When social good is applied correctly, sport can create bridges where boundaries usually exist, giving participants a lesson in teamwork, empathy for their teammates, and respect for their opponents. The positive effects of participation in learning the important life skills of goal setting, the development of a strong sense of morality, and the development of an appreciation for diversity. Knowing how sport can develop and shape minds and hearts, it isn't an unreasonable leap to think sports might be an instrument for social inclusion and social change. But nowadays, we cannot only look at sport from the social aspect. It has evolved from just being an activity to a business. Sport as a business and gender equality has transcended the typical workplace in terms of corporate structure to be part of the whole sport and business equality structure. For example, Ms. Jackson mentioned a short while ago about Serena Williams. Although she made strides and her successes financially, it's not comparable to men in tennis. Serena, although she commands the media attention and following, her take-home purse is not the same as men when they win. It is far less. It is more dramatic and glaring in tennis because Serena is a household name, and even men ranked lower than her gets more money than her, for which she's now an advocate. And Imran mentioned about the women and men in cricket.
Yes.
They receive less money. Sport is an industry with unparalleled global reach and power. And the scale is not just balance. Where payments are concerned, administration and media, I'm referring specifically here to television.
Yes.
You don't find a lot of women in those fields. So that's my contribution there.
All right. Thank you for that. Alina, I would like to engage you with the same question. So sport as a social good is usually administered by government and funded by government because it's a natural part of human socialization. However, and it's more socialistic or from a socialist economic perspective. However, business in its essence is capitalism, and the market depends or determines remuneration. So should we be differentiating between how we invest in sport for everyone, one, as a social good, versus how we treat remuneration in sport when we're talking about business?
Okay, so first you're asking us is a two-part question, right?
Yes.
The investment in sports supposed to be for everybody across the board, right? But what you find happening is that most of the investment is being placed towards the men, right? This is happening as you would have heard from almost all of the panelists. The men get more monies in terms of prize winnings. What happened to the women? But then you always hear them saying that the reason why it is we give women less money or the men more money is because of the percentage of men who enters or plays in these competitions, compared to why not if it is we have a major sponsor, so you go to the sponsor beforehand to invest in your event and in letting him know, okay, we are coming and we'll be looking at equality in our sport, and we want to be able to give the same amount of prize winnings to the men, to the women. That's not happening. Or they may go to the sponsors asking for that, to be invested into their sport, but then at the last minute, they more or less give the women less. Yeah. I have been advocating for that in my sport from ever since. Whereas I am playing 3 times a day or twice a day, doing as much running, doing all of things or more than the men. You can see because men will just do the regular one training. I'm doing double training, and I'm coming to a tournament. I'm paying the same amount of money as entry fee to compete in a tournament. But at the end of it, and this is national championships, huh? This is not just, I mean, all the local tournaments are the same, but national championships, I believe, should be more because it is the most prestigious event in the calendar of events, right? Okay. And yet still, men are getting, let's say, for example, 2,000, and women are getting like 500 first prize, and you try to wonder why. You know, so you want to say something, Atul?
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Right. So I'm thinking that, I mean, when you're going to get financial assistance, I think it's supposed to be across the board. You're going to them, letting them know, listen, it doesn't matter the amount, even though that has been over time, the percentage of men compared to women playing. And then that is where, when you get that happening, you always find that women don't stay long in sport. It has a higher percentage of dropout, because why am I investing triple time or double time as the men in this sport that I love, but yet still they are making more than me at the end of it? We have to buy the same rubbers, the same amount, it costs the same for our equipment, but yet still I have to work or always work double, triple over. So you find that there's a huge dropout with them in the sport, and then they tend to go to obviously not playing sport, and they're going to find a profession.
Okay.
So that's my contribution.
Thank you very much, Alina. Imran, I'm coming to you with the same question, but I'm going to give you some context to it. Assuming that we all agree that investment at the developmental level in terms of physical literacy and fundamentals in sport at the youth level should be the same. When it comes to elite sport, should the market determine economic remuneration?
I lost you for the last part there, Ato. Just give me back the last sentence.
Yes.
There.
The market determining remuneration.
Okay.
And what are your thoughts around how that should work?
Well, I like where we're heading, and it was in my head when you stated what are the social good compared to the capitalist sort of response that we look for at the end. That's the end product, right? I like Alina's answer with regards to her thoughts on what the ladies do, which is women, and what the men do, which is very similar. Sometimes, as Alina said, the women tend to do more, but not be remunerated as such. Okay, so coming to what you've asked, right? For me, when we see the youth structures, and that's something I have on my notebook here. Not a lot of funds has, for me, and there will never be enough funds, but I'm talking from a Trinidad context because I lived in England for a period of time and I can put it into a comparison, but you can't compare with figures at all right? What I'm saying here is that the amount of money that is spent at a junior level could never compare. And when we look at, for me again, and I'll give you this, I said it a couple of days ago, I grew up in a house with 2 sisters and a brother. So it's 2 boys and 2 girls. When the girls go to play a sport at a youth level, there was little or no resource. When the boys go, there was all equipment, there was everything there for them. And for me, that's a big disparity. And when I'm looking at it and looking back at it, because I'm in this conversation of gender equity, and I love the fact that women are in sport, but if they aren't involved at a younger age, the environment isn't created and therefore they can't go forward. So for me, not enough is being spent at that level, and it's a big imbalance with regards to where the funds are and where it isn't at all.
All right. Thank you, Ian. Ms. Jackson, I want to come to you in a short while pertaining to what we can do as individuals, especially what women can do to strengthen viewership numbers. But before I do so you can start to think about that, Imran, I want to press you on something.
Sure.
The last female T20 World Cup was viewed by over 80,000 fans in Australia. What is the likely impact of this on our lessons that we can take away from that in terms of promoting the marketability of female sport?
Excellent question, Ato. Firstly, that tournament was played in February, March, just before COVID became really locked down. So we were fortunate to get that final off in Melbourne. So let me also recognize that the final was played at one of the 2 largest capacity venues, right? There's Calcutta in India, and then there's Melbourne in Australia. Yeah. So that was a bonus. What we could say, and what I have seen, is that where there was more people, because the capacity crowd, and there was lots of articles written on it, the impact that had on the young ladies in sport was enormous. The Aussies even went on to say that they couldn't even put a price tag on it because it influenced, the power of influence, that the capacity, the crowd, the viewership, even on TV, was so big. They can't put a price tag on that. So not only in Australia, but worldwide, even you think about it, think about how many countries were viewing the final and the impact that would have made on the next generation of young ladies that play cricket. You know, it's enormous.
But I'm keen to understand, and maybe that's a conversation for another time, what lessons can we take away from that? Because it is clear that the investors in sport are concerned with return on investment. They're concerned with the bottom line, and sport at that level, that commercial level, is concerned with remuneration. And if it could have happened once, maybe there are lessons that we can replicate.
Well,
are you familiar with the context around that?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple quick ones, Ato. Yes. I'll give you a couple quick ones. The Aussies, everybody on this panel here would have traveled to Australia, played sport, or looked at sport in Australia. They are fanatics when it comes to sport, and that environment is created by whom? By the government. If you guys are aware, listening and viewing audience, the Aussies, the Australian government invests a lot of money into their sport from a fundamental level through their pathway, through their Institute of Sport. So their investment and their return on investment on that day, Ato, they would have been overwhelmed. And you could imagine the partners, as you alluded to, the business partners and the sponsors that are on board, enormous. I will end by saying this also, and I said it earlier, it is also determined by where the finals are, like where the tournament is hosted and what venue you use. So Melbourne was fitting, the environment was already created by the government, and the people love sport in Australia.
Yes.
It's a dream for a businessman.
Fantastic. As I go to Ms. Jackson, or just before I go to Ms. Jackson, I also want to talk about, because I'm familiar with some of the context around it, and there was solidarity from male counterparts. There was suspension of competing male leagues to allow the focus to be on that particular competition. So maybe that is a lesson we can draw from that as well.
There
And
are
I
many
think
lessons we could learn from
T20
that.
World Cup, where the West Indies won, the male West Indies team went to view the female game. And so the literature and observation is suggesting that the solidarity is very important in the advancement of the equality.
Correct. Correct.
Ms. Jackson, I am keen to discuss with you, and I have a little bit of a preamble. I was in Scotland in 2007 at a conference, and I heard these people chatting about, oh, I have my tickets, I have my tickets. And I'm wondering what major sport event is coming up. And so I investigated, and it was boys and girls champs in Jamaica. As a Jamaican, I would like you to share with me your thoughts and experience pertinent to disparity in viewership in sports in general in Jamaica, because I understand it wasn't always, the viewership wasn't always that great for the female championships. So I would love for you to speak to that a little bit, please.
That's a loaded question. You know, how much time do you have? All right, I'll make it short.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, in Jamaica, high school track and field has been going on for 120, competition has been going on for 120 years. So you're talking about, and in the early days, I mean, when I did my thesis, actually my master's thesis was looking at a comparative analysis of our male and female athletes. And as you read the literature, you recognize in the early days, you know, the men were dominant and they're doing their thing. They had to be good, and so they're only good against other men and stuff like that. And it came down. And so you had the male schools that were dominant coming along the way. That's why I said earlier, it's about a change as we come through. And as time got on, they were separate games. So there was the girls' champs and there was the boys' champs. So I came out of the girls' champs era, where the girls ran against the girls and hardly anybody was in the stadium. But the performances were great, but there was hardly anybody in the stadium nevertheless. The boys, the girls who went to girls' champs, who competed at girls' champs, would go the following week to boys' champs and give them the support. And the family would come out and everybody would come out and give the boys support. And then they decided to merge with, of course, not a smooth agreement with everybody. And so for the first time, persons who never went to girls' champs went to champs and saw how great the performances of the girls were, and that they really were putting on fantastic performance. And that has grown. As you now know, the stadium is usually full on a Friday and a Saturday night of an event that's now 5 days from Tuesday to Saturday. And the stadium, people actually can't get tickets to come in. And so now they are doing it they're actually watching it online, although the excitement in the stadium is so much more. But what has happened? If you notice what happens at the level of Jamaicans competing at the national level, the international level, the women are actually doing so much better than the men. From Merlin Ottey started getting the medal back in 1980. When you look on the graph, that line continuously goes up. When you look at the graph comparing the men, what you have is there's a line just above the horizontal axis that kind of goes straight across, meaning that they will get a medal just about every major championship. But the women were just gradually going up, because not only were they getting individual medals, they were also getting relay medals. And then Merlin Ottey, who was the catalyst with the women, was the one that started the medal count. And then she was joined by myself and Dion. And then, as you now know, the large group of women, the hurdlers and the throwers and the jumpers. With the men, Usain made a difference. And so their curve went up a bit when Usain, got those 3 or 4 medals, but the women still got much more medals than the men did. that particular year. But because Usain's performance was so outstanding, nobody has, not very many people have paid much attention to the fact that the women really got a lot more medals.
Yes.
So it continues to be ignored because of that. But now Shelley-Ann continued where Merlene left off and is having that kind of, well, before Shelley-Ann it was Veronica and then Shelley-Ann. And so the women continue. If you look at Jamaica's history and if you graph it, you will see the women continue to dominate in terms of performance and receive of medals. The men has strong performances that embraces the world that makes the difference.
Yeah.
So how did we get there? The women have struggled behind, but they work hard, like in everything they do. They work hard because they too want to achieve. Like in all the things that we have talked about, inequity in terms of what the remuneration is. But they stay the course, appreciate, continue to build on it, and continue to work. Why that has not happened, and it's a challenge as you continue, is that the culture in Trinidad and Tobago is quite different. You have excellent talent in Trinidad and Tobago, especially in Tobago and Togo, especially. You can see the body structure that gives for that talent. I mean, as you can hear me talking, I drive around, I see it. But what you don't have is, you don't have an institutional support for these kids to be able to understand that moving that talent from where it is to where it can be, to make them the best that they can be, and they can be the best in the world as well. That institutional support is not there. When you think about what happens coming out of your high schools, everybody wants to get married. I mean, your young people, the girls aren't more interested in getting married, having their boyfriend and doing that kind of social activity, as opposed to the drive to say, I want to choose this and this is the direction I want to go. And that is probably nurtured. That is probably a cultural thing. So until more of those female athletes step out and say, I want to use my talent to be the best in the world, because you have them in Trinidad. But if you notice what happens, why does everybody go to cricket? Why do you have spectatorship in cricket? It's because everybody goes there to have a lime. Do you think they can tell you exactly what happens in watching the cricket? A lot of them who go there, they don't, apart from the male who have specific interest in the cricket game, it's really about the lime. It's a nice entertainment process. And Trinidad and Tobago loves their entertainment. What I think we need to be doing is looking at how we can marry those two so that they can come in and enjoy the women as well, given their great performances. But the women have to put in the work, not one at a time, well, yes, one at a time, but to make it collective, so that when they run against each other, what you're creating is a competition. That's for running. I think cricket is on its way. It's creating better and better performances for the cricketers. Our body structure in the Caribbean is much stronger, in my viewpoint, than what happens in Asia, right? Why are we not producing greater women cricketers? We can. They need to just put themselves, work hard, they must want to be the best in the world, not the best in Trinidad or the best in Jamaica or the best in St. Lucia. They must want to be the best in the world. The success from those Jamaican athletes come from the fact that they don't restrict themselves to seem to be the best in Jamaica. They want to be number one in the world. And until you have that sort of vision, the drive that makes you go out every day or get up every morning or do 40 push-ups and 200 sit-ups is what makes the difference with what your output is when you get out there.
All right.
So there needs to be a change in the culture, and culture is not going to change over time, but it happens when you have to believe, the parental support has to be there to believe that my child wants to do this, I must give them that support to be able to move. And I think you can become a place in the world in sports.
All right.
I hope that answered your question.
Thank you very much for that. There's so much more I wanted to get to. But we have to go to some questions. Ms. Adams, you and I are going to have a conversation. I was hoping to get to that. The national female football team is coached by a man. The national female cricket team is coached by a man. The national female netball team is coached by a man as well. And that is a conversation I wanted to have. I'm dying to have that conversation, and maybe you and I can have that conversation at a subsequent time, because we have to show our appreciation to our listeners and get to a couple of their questions. So let's take a few questions, please.
Sure. And before I begin with the questions from the YouTube community, please allow me to say that the question with regards to Black Lives Matters and the future is female came from Marlon Saldanha. He is the person who contributed that question.
Marlon who?
Now, Marlon Saldanha.
Okay, thank you very much, Marlon. That was a fantastic question.
Now moving on to the question, which is addressed to both Alina Edwards and Ria Ramnarine, and it is from Lester Osuna, and he asks, should we not be asking women to show more support to other women to encourage them to remain in competitive sports longer and eventually in administration to be decision makers?
Alina, you want to go first?
Well, to answer Mr. Osuna's question, I have been doing that, both firstly, an athlete perspective, coach perspective, and then administrator. So a lot of the young girls, more or less, they look up to me because they actually see themselves in the street how I was able to be an athlete, still maintain their education, and coach, obviously coaching them as national athletes, and then also assisting them on an administrative basis. And what I tend to do is that for me, what I use, because I would have obviously been very young in the sport at the age of 8, it didn't have any nice clothing for girls. Everything was mainly big boy shorts, and you have to bust some folds in it. Or the jerseys were really, really big. And what I tend to do now with the younger girls, particularly that I was responsible for the national team, was made them look pretty, made them feel nice about themselves, so that when they come to training, they don't feel as if it's penance, but they're more excited to come to training and wear like a nice purple top, nice cords, or they could wear dresses, give them nice colors, and that's one thing I tend to do and speak to them about in terms of staying in the sport, getting the education. It is possible because I did it, but here was the problem, where there are still parents who don't think that sport is a profession or they can get a profession out of it. And so at some point in time, they themselves, the parents that is, are the ones that kind of force the kids or redirect them into to go heavily into education. And this is speaking to young girls. They find that the dropout level is so low because of the parents don't think that sport is a profession and they can't get or make money in that. And as such, okay, you can play it, but then you have to stop. So it's something that I have been working with for quite some time.
Thank you very much, Alina. Ria, do you have something to add?
Yes, just to say quickly with the young girls, the young ladies that, let's say, start at our gym, the first thing when they come and say, I want to be like you, I want to be a world champion like you, the first thing I tell them is, that's great. But listen, my goal for you is for you to be not like me, but 2 things: to be better than I am, and secondly, but most importantly, be the best version of yourself, be the best that you can be. So first I look at helping them to be better citizens, then being better leaders in one way or the other. And then actually I focus on the athletic part of them and focus on them being athletes. So I would like to think, yes, that I do contribute in that way. First, by making them a better person, helping them to be a better person, which obviously transfers to everything else.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ria. One more question, please.
The next question is addressed to Imran Jan. What value/importance is really looked at by society as a possible leader with regards to delivering parity to women in the field of salaries and gender equality issues in general?
Whoa, good question. Our society has so much to learn, and personally, I think we have to be more welcoming and more understanding of the role and responsibility that women can play, first and foremost. Only when we do that, then for me, we can understand the real worth of women in the industry, and only then they will be compensated as such. I mean, I could go on more, but only when the people involved in the various sports or various positions understand the worth of the women around the sport, as the only time we are going to see some sort of equity. I'll use the word equity for now, but I hope I answer your question. I was a little vague, but I hope I did answer your question.
All right. Thank you very much, Imran. And because you were so brief, we should take one more in appreciation of our viewers.
Okay, thank you very much. And this is an open question to the panel, and it's from Tyler Austin. And the question is, what do you all believe is the reason for women or young ladies coming up in sports locally, only participating from the ages of 9 to 17, and after that, they tend to drop out or lose interest in sport?
Fantastic question. Who's going to take that quickly? We have 1.5 minutes.
Well, I can just touch quickly on it and I will draw from research that I did with 113 athletes back in 2015. Yep. And their responses, academics came in at number 1. They loved their sport, but they were, for want of a better word, persuaded/forced to focus on their academics. Second thing is that they felt that the changes in their body, they felt being or looking too masculine took away from their femininity. And then came in the other questions or the other reasons of, disparity in pay, disparity in funding, and, lack of facilities, which I want to toss this one to Mr. John. Why is there only one change room at the cricket center? But those were the reasons that I got from the athletes themselves when I did my research. At that age, where to drop off.
Thank you very much, Ria.
Can I say something on that?
Go ahead, Alida.
This dropout with girls is not only locally. Yeah, this is mainly across the Caribbean or worldwide, you can say, and it goes back to what I just said, because at the end of the day, they don't see a future in sport. They don't see sport as a profession to make money, because at the end of the day, it is history that women has been kept down, or we have been given the lesser hand, or you was part of the stick then to get remunerated. So guess what? I can not go and continue to toil and play a sport, whereas I can go and probably study medicine, be a doctor, or be a lawyer or something else. And then the parents themselves who are not educated are the ones who are not steering them properly. So you find that the drop will always happen. Now, if there's a shift now and they realize, okay, we have a president who's an Olympic committee, we have presidents who are holding positions in the different organizations, and maybe there is a profession after all. Right, so there needs to be a shift happening with regards to how women is seen, how the education needs to go back to the parents as well as the coaches and whoever else are responsible for these young girls. And only then, when that happens, then you will see a shift happening in terms of them staying longer in the sport, because now it would now deem as, oh, I can actually be a president, of an association or president of a major organization. All right, so.
Thank you very much, Alina. I would like to thank all the panelists. Sorry, Imran, am I?
No, that's all right. I'm all right.
Yes. I would like to thank the panelists for their insightful contributions this evening. I am a bit disappointed in myself that I wasn't able to get out some policy or specifics as to what we can do to arrest this situation of gender inequality. We all agree that it's deep. The literature talks to that through the structures, but we also all have agency, and as actors committed to a better existence, as actors with arit or moral virtue, I think we all need to tap into what we can do at a micro level to influence the meso level, and then finally at a macro level to change the deep-seated structures and how sport is gendered and how masculinity or masculine concepts dominate the way we view sport in the first place. But I guess we will do better next time. I would like to thank the panelists that came before when we looked at sport, a vehicle for national development, when we look at sport, tourism, a viable option, university sport and its importance, sport law and drugs, and finally in this episode, we looked at gender equality in sport. I would also like to thank Mr. Pritchard and his committee for putting together this wonderful series. I think it's long overdue. I think I'm not Trinidadian, but as a person paid by the Trinidad and Tobago taxpayers, as an instructor at the University of Trinidad Academy of Sport, I think we all need to do more and give the nation their money's worth and start to put out some literature. Imran shared with me how difficult it was to find literature on Trinidad and Tobago. I know this firsthand. All the researchers on the panel, Mrs. Adams, you know this. So we need to do our part, especially as it relates to injustice. And in this case, we identify, acknowledge, and agree that the injustice in terms of gender equality is meted out against our sisters or the feminine gender, or to be more precise, meted out against people that are not of masculine gender, because we didn't even interrogate concepts of transgender and so on, and non-conforming or non-binary brothers and sisters. So all in all, thank you all. Thank you to the viewers. Thank you to the Academy. Thank you to the University of Trinidad and Tobago and all the people that made this possible. We look forward to more discourse in the future. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
You.
Okay, Ms. Jackson.
Bye. It was
Bye.
great. Thanks, Ian.
Okay.
Bye.